Welcome to the AI Insights podcast, where we explore the transformative world of artificial intelligence. I'm your host, Tony Stewart, Manager of Digital Innovation at Alithya. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Robert Gates, Principal Cloud Solution Architect from Microsoft. On today's episode, we'll be exploring the excitement and apprehension surrounding the rapid advancements of AI technology. The power of AI can be both exciting and intimidating, so let's look at demystifying some common blockers organizations are facing while tackling AI projects. Start, I'd love for our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us briefly your journey in the technology industry and a little about your role today?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Rob Gates, I'm one of our principal solution architects focused on the modern workplace solutions. I've been doing Copilot and Copilot for M365 for about a year and a half now. And over the past several decades, I've been doing lots of different technologies covering voice, telco, communications. Obviously, Teams falls into that. And then weaving in, obviously, Gen AI and a lot of the data services around it.
Awesome. Yeah, we met in the team space, so really excited for you to join us for our first episode here. So I wanted to kind of start digging into this and discuss what are some common blockers for Copilot adoption. So we've seen some repeat scenarios around privacy, security, but be interested in your opinion on what are sort of the highest level issues that organizations are facing right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's really a couple of things that kind of come into play. I mean, I think what fundamentally the first piece is just organizations and folks inside of their organizations just understanding the AI's potential, right? And where can we weave Copilot in? Where can we leverage Copilot to amplify, accelerate, streamline, different workflows and processes, right? Allowing people to maybe be more creative, innovative, potentially removing friction in a business process. So there's a lot of need to just get the understanding of the AI potential capabilities. And then I think as people start to understand the power of Copilot and then weaving that into business process, usually one of the next key questions is security, compliance, governance. How is my data protected when working with the LLMs and that my data is not being shared out across the LLMs, maybe to other organizations? So that's usually a hot topic. And then I think, if we look at it, data management, data quality is definitely a topic that comes up quite a bit. We probably all have legacy data that's been around for 5, 10, 20 years. I know I've personally migrated data from like M365 or from old file servers into M365 or, what used to be called BPOS at the time. And so is that data relevant to the business? And so, a little bit of data management will also come into play. So it's tricky, but it's, I think once we get past a couple of those, then it's really focused in on that business impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've seen the data migration or data quality part of that really come up a lot as well. Do you see different blockers based on the different sort of stakeholder groups that are involved in a Copilot project?
I mean, a little bit. It's not. I think fundamentally the Copilot experiences are probably kind of similar across the board. It's just the focus of the tasks and the things and the functions that those individuals do. So I think it's important to focus in on like, how does each department, user persona, group, et cetera, how do they work? Like, where's the friction or the frequency in a particular business process? And then on kind of understanding like the associated data, right? Going back to the data, what data is there to support it? And kind of how does that weave into the overall flow? So I think a lot of it's more just about that individualized experience and then just knowing where to weave the tools in. Some things can be very repeatable, right? And in those cases, we've got new things that are coming out around Copilot agents and some of the automation. And in those use cases, having the power of like a Gen AI and a Copilot kind of basically doing the task for you is powerful, but you got to identify those common patterns that can be repeatable versus where do you want to amplify a person's abilities. But I think from what I've seen, whether it's IT, security, HR, at the end of the day, people are doing tasks in the modern work tools. They're working with data. They're creating output. It's just homing in on to what's specific to them. Where's that data, et cetera.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we're primarily connecting with IT resources or human resources as the primary stakeholder in these projects. So really interested to see. My experience has been that there is similar repeatable blockers or concerns in the space. A lot of that handled from the education space, but love your input on that. So any thoughts as far as for those initial learning hurdles or the initial challenges you're seeing from organizations? What are they doing to start overcoming those or beginning their projects?
It's really, again, getting people to understand the overall premise of how we're going to weave Copilot into business processes and flow. Um, Unpacking sort of the understanding of how like an LLM works, inferencing configuration, where it's there to just provide a request, that there's no data being stored in there. That's kind of some key things to get past. Then you really need to think about sort of that data estate. Couple of interesting things. We talked about security there for a minute in the beginning there, uh, but there's almost an inverse aspect, right? So when you start thinking about the adoption and obviously security concerns, privacy, and driving driving things forward, it's understanding those business processes and the associated data to help that individual, that department or team get something done. One of the things I've seen is as you start unpacking those business processes and you're kind of looking at how a particular job or task gets done, in some cases, it's not that the data is over permissioned, it's actually the inverse. Turns out as you unpack those business processes that there's key data across the organization that we need to get to those folks who are doing those tasks. So it is a bit of a balancing act of maybe opening up permissions in some cases, tightening things down and locking it down. Um, and it's also important to think about not just data locations and applying permissions to the location, but also classification and really securing the data itself. So that typically comes up quite a bit in some early adoption journeys.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't seen too much of the idea of opening up additional permissions, but that makes sense, especially when you look at what your Copilot has access to. If you're inheriting the permissions of a file based on who needed that information at that time or who that presentation was made for, that information, if it doesn't need to be locked down, can become vital for Copilot answering for another user that never had that file shared with them.
Yeah, well, when you unpack some of these sort of business processes, what you're finding is that somebody's calling somebody else, or they've got to go ask for data from, or an answer to get some specific information from someone in the organization, and that's friction, right? And so it's being able to identify those things and say, okay, well, you really need access to the data. Is it something we can share with you? Great. Okay, now let's figure out how to do that. So it's actually interesting. It's like, yes, we're always concerned about security and compliance. We want to definitely lock things down to just the individuals that need access at that particular time. But I'm finding a lot of situations where we've got to actually open stuff up. So it's interesting. It's kind of a tough challenge, right? You want to be super secure, but you want to make sure you got the right data to the right people.
I think we could explore this for a while, but I would love to think about the notion of, especially with the SharePoint copilots being accessible, that starting point of your technical readiness. SharePoint is a place that you start to dig in, and organizations have legacy SharePoint sites, and they've likely been through several migrations. So it's a very easy starting point for the conversation of, well, how much of this stuff do we still need? And we want this one to be a little bit different, but knowing that there's almost a rising use case for more accessible information in certain SharePoint environments or on SharePoint sites, especially when you can just kind of click button to start building copilots off of that, is a really interesting conversation tying back into maybe not necessarily the technical readiness aspect, but what are the plans for the organization side of it.
Agreed.
So kind of on that topic of what you're seeing, do you have any examples of real clients that kind of ran into an initial block in that their project and kind of what they were able to do to start moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wide range of companies that I've spoken to and have worked with, them through the Copilot journey, across a lot of different verticals. And I think it's when you look at it again, it goes back to clarity of where the potential benefits are. Um, these technologies are moving fast, and so being able to stay connected to the change and the updates and the improvements. If you look at where Copilot was, a couple of months and over a year ago, to where it is today with even our announcements that we had just recently, in our what we call our Wave 2 event. Uh, you're seeing continued innovation and really simplification of the tools across the journey. Um, I recently worked with a manufacturing customer, and one of the things they do in there, they do a lot of unique custom builds for customers, and it requires a lot of interaction, discussions, and prep work in before they can go in and create those products. And so what they did was they actually started building templates and using Copilot through the workflow to basically streamline that journey, but also make it easier for the customer to go in and have dialogue with some of the more common configurations, and then request the ability to go in and do more specific elements or specific customization if needed. And just kind of weaving that into that journey, because there's a lot of back and forth between the customer and the folks internal to review, to validate, to confirm it's something that can be maybe tweaked or customized. Copilot's definitely helped there. And I think it was about 50% savings in time. And so if you start looking at all the touch points across the organization, it can really add up, from a cost savings, but also freeing up those individuals potentially to do more impactful work for the organization. So it's not just, yeah, we can save 10 hours or we can, make a few extra bucks in this particular area. It's, hey, we can actually start a new business line or, do more innovative things for our customers that have maybe a higher margin. So it can really get intricate and interesting at the same time.
Is your organization ready to unlock the full potential of Microsoft Copilot? Before you dive in, it's crucial to ensure that your organizational data is accessible to the right people. Alithya's technical readiness assessment guides you through the best practices to discover, classify, and secure your data so you're fully prepared to leverage Copilot's capabilities. From setting up sensitive information types to implementing data loss prevention, we cover it all. To see full other details and book your assessment, visit alithya.com/tech-ready. The link will also be available in the description box. Yeah, that brings up a good point on the, how organizations are measuring these things, especially as you start these projects. My personal thought is you kind of want that statement ahead of time. The measurement of time, I think, is fantastic for this in terms of saving 10 hours. But you kind of bring up a great point in that's not time that means nothing. That's time that then means 10 more hours of doing something else. And what's the business value there?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we kind of look at it, and there's sort of out of the box experiences, right? When you deploy Copilot for M365, like you're in a Teams meeting, you can do the meeting recap, summarization. You get a lot of benefits out of the box, right? In Word, Excel, PowerPoint. But when you weave it into those business processes, it is kind of like what you're saying. It's important to identify not just what is that outcome that we're trying to optimize for, but what is the potential financial benefit. Like take a sales process, and if I could maybe handle twice the number of proposals or maybe RFP responses in a given weekly cycle, is that potentially giving us the opportunity to double sales, right? Because if we have a 50% close rate, I now have doubled the number of proposals or RFPs that I'm processing. And now how does that translate through the system? So as you start to identify those business outcomes, you got to look at those potential metrics around there. Is it increasing sales? Is it time savings? And if we're going to have time savings, where do we invest that time savings into other areas of the business? So I think the KPIs are super important to help justify, obviously deploying and leveraging the tools, but then being able to go back to folks across the organization to show them the impact and help drive more innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah. My next question was going to be, what would your advice be for organizations that are starting these projects and saying, what is our return on investment going to be, or how do we measure it?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're thinking about a deployment, it's important to get a sampling of individuals, departments, and groups, right? It's not Don't just deploy it to one department, and also make sure to deploy it to different levels across the organizations, right? Managers, senior executives will have slightly different experience than folks that are maybe on the front line and different areas across the org. So, having a diverse maybe pilot deployment is important. Um, driving down and understanding again those business outcomes with those metrics and KPIs underneath it, and then really a strong adoption program. Like when you think about it, it's we're changing the way we work, right? And we're in many cases, like if you're really super busy working on something, you almost go into autopilot, right? It's automatic mode. I don't need to think about it. I know if I do these 12 things, I can get an outcome. And so it's kind of hard to change, right? Here's a tool that's going to help me do a task 5, 10, 20% faster, potentially, or even more. And, but I do need to take a minute, slow down, think about using that tool or that technology to then drive forward. So, uh, yeah, having a consistent adoption program that is maybe repeatable, right? It's not just a one-time adoption program, but every week, every month for a period of time, just driving home that transformation and helping people see that benefit, I think is super important.
I would love to spend a lot of time on what is the people side or the end user side of that adoption story. Um, so from the organization standpoint, when they're looking at starting something like this, what do you see or what would you suggest as far as building out a structured pilot program?
It's important to drive into some of those business outcomes, right? So again, we talked about the people side of it, having a diverse pilot group. Um, Pick one or two key outcomes that folks are doing, something that's not maybe overly complex, right? Something that's manageable that can be done in a reasonable amount of time. You don't want to try to do a business process that's more, boil the ocean type scenario where you've got many stages and steps that have to be investigated and thought through about how you might leverage Copilot in those workflows. So pick a manageable outcome and make sure you celebrate that success, right? If you're able to leverage Copilot to maybe double, triple the time it takes to get something done or remove friction or improve customer experience, it really does start to sell itself to folks, right? I have been using Copilot for probably a year and a half now, and like it took me a little while, right, to see the benefit, to have that kind of aha moment. But I'll tell you what, now, like that's my go-to tool. Like that's the first thing I do is I go in and I talk to Copilot. I ask to, how I might do something or get it to almost be a research assistant to go pull insights and information to help me work through a problem. And so now it's just become second nature. It's my go-to tool in many cases. But it took a little while, right? Even me, I'm an early adopter on technology typically. And, it's like I said before, like if you fall into your old habits, it's like, look, I've got a deadline. I know how to do this. Maybe it's painful, but I'm going to go do it that way because I got to get it done, right? So it is a people change at the end of the day.
Yeah, I had the unique advantage of sitting behind you in a conference room when you had a Copilot license and I hadn't had one yet. Or sorry, I didn't have mine yet. Watching you get to use it, I was so excited for when I got to. But I struggled absolutely the same way. It's the amount of learning what it can do over time, and you know I look at it and have to imagine, well, what can this do?
Well, and that's the interesting thing too, because it is so powerful. And it's not like a bullet list of specific commands that you do. It's a conversation you're having with an application, right? And having this dialogue in kind of more of a human fashion, right? It's like you and I having this conversation right now, where you're having kind of a similar conversation with Copilot. It's like, hey, I need to go do the following in preparation for a meeting with my manager on a topic, right? You're defining the goals, the objectives, and having that natural conversation at first kind of feels a little weird, right? And so it takes a little muscle to learn and to build up the ability to really almost be like, if you think about it, you're almost becoming a manager, right? And
Mhm.
you're delegating some tasks with clarity to this agent, to this co-pilot, to basically help you get those things done. So it's interesting, but it's a change, right? And that's
Yeah.
people sometimes hate change.
Yeah, it's a far cry from the growing application menus to then the contextual application menus to now I can just talk to it and it starts doing what I want it to. You brought up a really interesting point when it comes to an organization that's looking at setting up their structured pilot program, specifically in identifying a process and following that. I think that, traditionally when I look at a technology migration, very much in the team space, it was you look at, okay, what happens when we turn this on for everyone? And there's the typical journey of, well, what are they going to need to learn, how do we get them started, preparing them with those materials. When you look at a Copilot pilot, are you actually starting with individual persona and use case and focusing in on that, as opposed to, say, turning it on and doing a broad level, here's what the tool is and how it works?
It depends, right? It depends on the history and the comfort of adoption and change within an organization. Um, if the organization has historically had good patterns of adoption and change on leading edge type technologies, you can definitely deploy it on a more broader scale. And in that context, you're going to focus in on really driving the benefits and the impact of sort of the out of the box experiences. You're in a Teams meeting, you've got the transcript going on, the AI notes and the to dos and the tasks being created. You've got the ability to go into Copilot and almost use it as like a brainstorming research assistant tool, or in Word, assembling a document, or in PowerPoint, putting together slides, etc. So it is definitely, you're going to get a benefit out of the box doing it that way. But you also want to make sure that your teams are early adopt, like they're willing to go through those transformations. If you've had some struggles in in organizations or in different departments and teams where they're not comfortable with change and early adoption of tech, then it does require a little bit of finding maybe those one or two leads in each of those departments. That becomes maybe your initial target to get them to kind of start to feel the tools, give you some immediate feedback of what might need to be tweaked and changed. And then you can actually build your adoption journeys targeted to those nuances of those departments. So it depends. I mean, I think there's really no right or wrong answer, but you got to look at some history and of the organization in some cases.
I love that approach too, for the going back to what we were talking about earlier as far as access to information and the data estate. Identifying those early personas and those early users is a great opportunity to find, where's this persona missing data? Where are they not getting the information that they may need? And tying that early pilot into sort of an ongoing technical readiness component. It's one thing to kind of make sure, do we have file permissions set up how we expect them, and is everyone in the sites they should be in? But identifying where you need to open it up, that's a fantastic way of identifying something that you would have never had configured before.
Agreed.
So I know we spent a lot of time discussing how organizations are getting started. And again, something you mentioned earlier on and then a little bit afterwards was the ongoing recent changes to the platform. So could you spend some time to tell us about the Wave 2 announcements?
Yeah, some really exciting stuff that just got announced the other day. You know, when you kind of look at the product, right, it is evolving very quickly. The industry is definitely evolving fast and continuing to innovate and drive more features and capabilities. So of course, we're doing similar inside of Copilot and driving that journey. So a couple things that were announced that I think are pretty transformational are what we call Copilot pages. And this is a unique way for you to go into Copilot. And, again, I think I mentioned I use it a little bit sometimes as a brainstorming tool. And so, I go into Copilot, maybe I'll copy paste some of that data to a Word doc, and I'll continue to go back and forth. Well, now right from Copilot, I can go in and hit edit and page, and it brings up in essence, a loop page that will bring that data in. And then I can continue to go back and forth with Copilot to kind of flush out my thoughts and ideas. And where the exciting piece is then suddenly I get to a point where I'm like, you know what? I need some collaboration. And now I get to bring in a team of folks by sharing that page and having collaborative Copilot conversations with that data set and other individuals. So now we're extending kind of this personal Copilot experience now into areas where you get that collaboration component, right? So now I went from a blank slate to something I was brainstorming on to now a team collaboration in a matter of, potentially minutes and hours, depending on how quick I need to get that done. So that's definitely one that's got me excited. I'm going to start using that shortly.
Yeah, I can't wait to have that one. That was the most exciting announcement to me, was being able to, because I'm using Copilot now with, people that I'm on a Teams call with, and I'm, hey, we can jump over here and we can start doing this, or let me ask it and find out something that we're working on. So the idea of being able to just have that assistant that collaborates with us, so exciting.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. We announced that Excel is now GA, and we've added a ton of improvements into that product now, and I think a lot of folks will be super excited. We've also included the ability to do more advanced analytics. And so now you can weave in Python into that journey and use Copilot to help you build the Python to then work against that large data set. So that's definitely an exciting piece. And then PowerPoint's been an interesting one. I've been in the habit of going into Word and building out these sort of outlines, kind of thinking through my content of what I want to present in PowerPoint. And we now have what's called a narrative builder right inside of PowerPoint, where you basically, in real time, kind of in a loop page format, edit and build an outline. And you can actually use Copilot to help you build the outline and say, hey, I want to do a presentation on the following. Copilot will start sketching that out, and then you can go in and move and edit and tweak. And what's nice is that when you can then submit that to Copilot in PowerPoint, it's going to review the outline, build out your presentation, and you can also link it to like a document image library. So maybe you've got company branding and image and assets, and now it's going to reference all of those resources to potentially pull into your PowerPoint. So having that narrative builder, instead of me doing an outline in Word and then pointing Copilot to the Word doc, I can just do it naturally right from PowerPoint. So that's exciting. And then I think the most impactful one is agents, right? And the ability to, as you get comfortable with the out of the box experience, you're going to start moving into more deeper business process things. And you're going to see situations where there's a repetitive process. You're like, oh, I do this thing every week or whatever. That's an agent conversation. And where I can just go to Copilot and go, hey, I need you to do the following. And it's got a process mapped out, action items, things that may need to be converted, or whatever the LLM is doing for you on your behalf. And at the end of the day, you get the results, right? And so to be able to build out those agents to go do tasks for you, I think is super exciting. And can't wait for the builder to show up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be incredible to start adding, actions into these, especially when you start with the focusing on the process. How is this transforming a process? And you're able to pass off to Copilot, and from there, please go do these things and come back and wait for this, and incredible changes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this part of the conversation. We will be continuing the conversation. We started to get into it, the people and process transformation. So really excited to dig into the user side of adoption. And stay tuned by following us on the Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Also, don't forget to check out Alithya's exclusive Copilot Technical Readiness Assessment Workshop offer at alithya.com/techready.